Welcome back to yet another episode of The Road Chose Me, and on today's episode we're going to dig right into more advanced paperwork topics. In the introduction to Driving Around the World video, I talked about how when you cross borders you can just get a temporary import permit, except for a handful of countries that require a thing called a Carnet De Passage. So what even is this Carnet De Passage? Why would you want one? Why is it better? Why is it painful? All of that is coming up on today's video. Stick around, I'm going to go into all the nitty-gritty details. You might be wondering, why would you even want to get a Carnet? For some countries in the world, you simply have to have one. They are absolutely mandatory and there is no way to get around it. If you want to drive your own vehicle into a handful of countries in the world, you must get a Carnet De Passage. It is as simple as that. And it turns out that while a Carnet can make the border crossings a lot simpler, Carnets are also a pain in the backside. They're extraordinarily expensive and they're kind of like an old world bureaucratic nightmare. And to be honest, I really detest the things. Let's back up a little bit. You might be wondering, what even is this thing called a Carnet De Passage? It's an international customs document. You can think of it a little bit like a passport for your vehicle. You get one before you trip, and for each country that you go to, when you take it to customs, they will stamp it in so your vehicle is legally entered into the country, and then they will stamp it out again before you leave. That way there's a really clear document paper trail that your vehicle has entered the country, but more importantly, your vehicle has left the country. And the whole reason that this system exists is because some countries in the world, they're really worried that people will bring their foreign vehicle and try to sell it in the country. And they won't pay import taxes, they won't pay duties. So they invented this whole system called a Carnet De Passage, which is French for passbook, to really ensure that you will actually take your vehicle out again. That's what this is all about fundamentally. That's the part you need to remember. So how do they make sure that you're going to take it out? Well, to get one of these things, you have to put down a bond. You have to put a whole bunch of money in a bank account that gets locked away for the entire duration of your trip. This guarantees that you'll bring the vehicle out of that country because you won't get your deposit back unless you do. So just like a passport, a Carnet de Passage, it includes a whole bunch of details about the vehicle, and then it has a bunch of pages where you get an entry stamp and an exit stamp. A little bit of it gets torn off and given to customs on the way in, and then another little piece gets torn off and given to customs on the way out. And as you go, you'll be collecting entrance stamps and then exit stamps for every single country you pass through. At the end of your trip, you show up in your home country, you give them back the Carnet, they now know that the car has come back to its country of origin, and then you get your money back and everyone's happy. If at some point along the way you don't leave a particular country, that country is going to have a record of you entering, and they're going to have the little slip that they kept. And what happens then is they put in a claim and say, this vehicle has violated our customs procedures, and the issuing authority of the Carnet is going to have to pay a whole stack of money as like a fine or a fee, and then you won't get your deposit back. It varies quite a bit depending on where you live and depending on which country the vehicle is registered in. Most people get a Carnet from their home country, which is also the country their vehicle is registered in. So Germans get it from the German Motoring Authority, Australians get it from the Australian Motoring Authority. In North America, the Canadian Automobile Association used to issue Carnets. They don't do that anymore. There's only one issuer now in all of North America. They're called Boomerang Carnets, and they issue Carnets for vehicles registered in the United States and for vehicles registered in Canada. And the details on how much your Carnet is going to cost depends on a lot of different factors. Some countries charge a lot of money, some countries charge much less money. Before anything else comes into play, there's always some sort of documentation fee or simply a processing fee. And this is the amount of money you pay just to get one. You'll never get this money back. It's just the cost of bureaucracy. For Boomerang Carnets in North America, this is about $1,500. And the important thing to remember is that your Carne is only valid for 1 year. If your trip is planned to last more than 1 year, you'll have to renew the Carne while you're on the road. You can get a new one FedEx to you, and you probably have to FedEx the old one back. And each year you'll have to pay this $1,500 again. That's simply the processing fee. You'll never see it again. Other countries, I know this amount is much lower, but there still is some amount that is simply gone. On top of the processing fee, you have to figure out how you're going to pay the deposit, the amount of money that they hold in a bank account and you won't get back until your car comes back to its original country. This amount is going to depend on how much your vehicle costs as a starter, and it's going to depend on which countries you're planning on visiting in the world. Some countries want a deposit amount that's, say, twice the amount of your vehicle. So they assess how much your vehicle is worth. Let's say my Jeep is worth $20,000. Some countries want a deposit that's twice the value of the vehicle. So I have to put $40,000 in bond in a bank account I never get to touch for the duration of my trip. I have to do that before I can even get a Carne. So some issuing authorities make you actually put that amount of money in a bank account, while other ones will let you take out some kind of insurance policy against that amount of money. So you don't have to actually give them $40,000 as a deposit. Maybe you only have to give them $5,000 or $10,000. And the details of this are going to vary for every single issuing authority in the world. And when I was trying to get one for Africa, at the time, there was nowhere in North America that would issue one, so I tried to get one from many different places in the world. And it turns out that the FIA oversee this whole process, the International Federation of Automobiles, and they're quite strict about who can issue them and who has insurance for certain parts of the world. And so I found out really quickly that lots of automobile associations around the world, they simply will not issue me a Carne. For example, the German authorities, the Australian authorities, they won't issue me a Carne because my Jeep is registered in Canada. So it became quite a pain in the neck. I did find out South Africa would probably issue me one, maybe Malaysia issues them. I think Switzerland does as well, but I think they're really expensive for foreigners. Depending on where you live, actually getting one can be a real pain in the neck, and certainly the amount of money you have to deposit can be enormous. And I said some countries require a deposit of twice the value of the vehicle. Certainly there are other countries in the world that want 4 times the value, and Egypt is notorious for requiring 8 times the value of your vehicle to be held in bond. That's right, you could easily have to put $60,000 or $80,000 away in a bank account that you can never touch before you can even get an international Carnet De Passage to be allowed to drive your vehicle into Egypt. Yep, you really do have to put that much money away, and you have to have that as real money. There is the insurance option as well, depending on if your insurer does that, but it's safe to say you'll still have to put $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 away before you can get a Carne. Carnes were certainly the way that everyone used to drive around the world. It's kind of just what everybody did. And there's no doubt about it, they're gonna make the border crossings way easier. When it comes to customs, all they do is stamp it and then that's it, you move on. You should never pay any money at any of the borders. So in that regard, it's kind of more straightforward than getting a temporary import permit. Many countries around the world, when you try to get a temporary import permit, they're gonna ask for $10 or $20. And the thing is, you never really know if that's legit or if that's the officer who just wants some money in his pocket. So certainly a Carne can remove a lot of extortion from the border crossings, especially in less rigid places like West Africa or Central Asia, where extortion is kind of more common. So while a Carne can make the border crossings easier and it can certainly remove some attempted extortion, they can be really expensive and they can be a pain in the neck to try and organize and get. This list changes quite often, and it's currently July 2020. I feel like anything I say now, it'll be valid for a while, but possibly that's going to change in the future. As it stands right now, no country in any of the Americas, so that's South America, Central and North America, they do not require a Carne, and in fact, they don't even know how to process them. So even if you're shipping a vehicle in from Australia or from Europe, No Carne is necessary. They haven't been required for 15 or 20 years, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So certainly if you're thinking of driving the Pan American Highway, you can forget about this whole Carnet De Passage business, and you can just use the temporary import system. Thousands of people do it every year, and it works really well. If you're looking at shipping a vehicle across to Europe, currently they don't require a Carnet De Passage. You can use one if you want, but you don't have to. When I shipped mine into Belgium, I learned that the EU has a rule currently that says the customs officer who authorizes your vehicle entry, they may ask for a refundable deposit. So you would have to put down an amount of money. I think it was maybe 1,000 euros, maybe it was 5,000, I can't remember. They hold on to that money until your vehicle leaves the EU. I wasn't asked to put down that deposit, but it is something that might happen if you ship your vehicle over there without a Carnet de Passage. Before I went to Africa, everybody told me it is utterly impossible to drive around Africa without a Carnet de Passage. I decided I didn't have the $50,000 deposit and it was too much of a pain in the neck. So I went for it without a Carnet. I learned a ton and I met other people doing it without a Carnet as well. So I can tell you, it absolutely can be done. You can drive a foreign vehicle around Africa without a Carnet, but there are a few asterisks on that. Senegal are being really painful. If your vehicle is more than 8 years old, they're gonna try and get money out of you at the border. Lots of people wind up paying 200 or 400 euros. This is blatant corruption. They are absolutely putting it in their pocket. People have called their embassies, people have camped at the border for a week, and so far, it's something that people just can't get out of. The customs guys there just seem to have corruption dialed. You'll get through, you will get a temporary import permit, but you might have to pay a bit for it. As I moved down the west coast, the other country that turned out to be a pain was Ghana. They wanted me to get some sort of insurance against this deposit. I read reports of people doing it and it's totally possible. It's probably just going to take a day or two to organize, and you might have to go to a big border rather than a small border. Other than that, all the way down West Africa, temporary import permits work fine. Then you get down into what they call the Southern Africa Customs Union. Namibia, South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, and I think Swaziland, you can drive in without a Carnet de Passage. I did it and I met tons of other people doing it. I got a 6-month temporary import permit and it was really easy, no problem. But if you're going to ship a vehicle by ocean into or out of any of those countries, you must have a Carnet de Passage. This is absolutely non-negotiable. Then all the way up East Africa, no problem. I went to every country without a Carnet de Passage. Some of them were a little bit reluctant to give me a temporary import permit, but I managed to talk my way around it, all the way until Egypt. And Egypt is super famous. They require that huge deposit. Their bureaucracy is off the charts. Myself, I didn't have that money for a big deposit, and I know lots of other people, they get a Carnet to use in Africa, but they don't even add Egypt, so they don't have to increase the amount of their deposit. So what a lot of people have been doing lately is you get a local Carnet. So this is issued by the Egyptian Motoring Authority. It's only valid in Egypt. It kind of looks like a Carnet, but it's written in Arabic and it's kind of a local thing. I found a guy, he dealt with all of it for me. He put the deposit down himself. He did all the legwork. He met me at the border and I paid $500 for that. All in, all done, finished. I never got any of that money back. So that included the processing fee and whatever deposit he put down and got back himself. So it cost me $500 to drive my Jeep into Egypt. For me, it was worth it. Egypt was always my dream, but obviously you'll have to make that decision yourself. In terms of other countries in the world, Australia in recent years has demanded a Carnet. So you cannot ship a foreign vehicle into Australia without a Carnet de Passage. And a huge caveat on that, you can only keep your foreign vehicle there for 1 year. In theory, you can get your Carnet extended, but Australia right now aren't very excited about allowing that to happen. So if you're thinking of shipping your foreign vehicle to Australia, just know you will have to get a Carnet de Passage and you will only have 1 year for that car to be in Australia. And then finally, we get to Central Asia. And there's a lot of different information out there. A friend was just there before coronavirus with his American plated vehicle. So the details change a little bit, but it's safe to say that Iran absolutely needs a Carnet de Passage. So do India and Pakistan. And in recent years, China and Myanmar have also been mandatory for a Carnet De Passage. And because of where they're situated, if you're trying to drive London to Southeast Asia, you pretty much have to go through one of those at least. That route, mandatory that you have a Carnet De Passage. If you live in a country where it's easy to get a carnet and you don't have to put down an enormous deposit, absolutely, I would get a carnet if I was going to drive around Africa. But if you live in North America or somewhere else where a carnet is really expensive or really painful to get, my advice is you can travel around Africa without one. I did it, many other people did it. And certainly if you're looking at Central Asia or shipping to Australia, there's just no question, you have to have one. And then finally, there's a couple of edge cases, like if your vehicle gets stolen while you're in a country, what happens to your carnet deposit, or if it burns to the ground or something else like that. And there is totally a way. You can go to the local police station or to a justice of the peace. You get them to sign the back of the carnet and write out a police report, and you will find a way to get your deposit back if your vehicle is destroyed. So there you have it, Carnet De Passage. It's a big topic, and I know it's a complicated document. So it's really going to depend where you're going in the world, whether you have to deal with this or whether you can forget about it completely. Let me know if you've got any questions in the comments. I'm happy to help in any way I can. And if this was helpful, please do hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. Plenty more practical videos coming that'll help you get out there and drive around the world. Until next time, have fun out there.